And now we move to economic development element, and we have Michael Separano here for this. Michael, go ahead.
Hey, thanks, Robert. My name is Mike Sepanaro. I'm a senior planner with Long Range Planning, and I'm going to be doing two element amendments. One is economic development element, and one is interjurisdictional coordination. Taylor, I appreciate you bringing up that PowerPoint. Let me go over the economic development element first. It is a little bit more substantive than the interjurisdictional coordination element update, but I'll try to be pretty concise and clear about each of the updates that I'm making on this element. Next slide, Taylor. So the purpose of this briefing, I'm going to provide an overview of all the amendments I'm making to the economic development element. I'm going to summarize some public comments I've received to date, and I'm going to offer an opportunity for the commissioners to ask questions and provide feedback. And then just as a heads up, a detailed staff report is provided in advance of this briefing. Next slide. So just as some backgrounds, the updates I made, they were workshopped with county staff from the PDS department, the executive office, business interests, Snohomish County Arts Commission, and they were also made available to the public digitally. And the proposed updates are all consistent with CPP, GPP, and MPP policies. They're all along these following themes, themes of comparative advantage, specialization, freight, themes of creative placemaking and innovation, sustainability and emerging green industries, economic resiliency, regulatory reform, workforce training, human services and childcare opportunities, and finally, displacement mitigation and diversity, equity, and inclusion. I'm going to try and do a slide on each of these themes. Next slide, please, Taylor. First one, comparative advantage, specialization, and freight. I had two amendments along these themes. The amendment to 3D4, slight workshop to say Snohomish County shall support the expansion of public sector port and airport assets to fully utilize economic development advantages provided by state or federal laws, expand the flexibility and usage of Forward Train Zone 85 with magnet site and alternative site framework, and consider the creation of a potential port of Snohomish County. And just for clarification, their previous economic development element had it worded that we're going to investigate creating this foreign trade zone. It has been created, and so now we're amending it to make it more clear and explore even more sort of freight opportunities with a magnet site in an alternative site framework. The other amendment on these themes is 3D6, and that just states the county shall assist regional and international trade by supporting diversity of freight modes and intermodal connections along sea, rail, and air networks to connect export-oriented goods with global markets and workers, as well as meet environmental goals. And basically, the background to these amendments here, comparative advantage and specialization, they lead to greater economic prosperity than self-sufficiency, but it requires a supportive freight and intermodal network to bring export-oriented goods to the international marketplace. Next slide, Taylor. The next theme here is along the theme of creative placemaking and innovation. And I have two amendments. First is Objective 2B. Snohomish County shall encourage entrepreneurism and innovation through creative placemaking, defined as the use of arts, culture, and urban design by diverse parties to strategically shape the physical and social character of a place to spur economic development, promote enduring social change, and improve the physical environment. I added a policy as well, 2B1. Specifically, Snohomish County shall plan for an environment where artists, creative and cultural nonprofit organizations and businesses, developers, and other parties create a vibrant and creative community with greater access and activities for arts, cultural, and educational opportunities. In the background here, creative placemaking is becoming a more important theme to economic development. Creative placemaking improves neighborhoods for both residents and workers. Additionally, artistic and creative industries experience one of the largest declines during COVID. There's a quote too from the Vision 2050 plan. The new economy relies on a highly skilled and diverse population to stimulate creative and innovative enterprise, as well as local serving employment in retail, healthcare, and other services. Next slide, Taylor. The next theme, sustainability and emerging green industries. I had two amendments here. Policy 1B2, emphasize development and growth of clean technology and green jobs linked to the preservation and sustainability of the natural environment, including jobs in environmental justice, energy efficiency, renewable energy industries, natural resource management, and other technologies that address climate change. And I had a slight change to objective 1B. It used to say Snohomish County shall balance economic and environmental concerns. And now it says Snohomish County recognizes that a healthy environment is essential to quality of life and shall address environmental concerns to support economic development. Background behind these two amendments. First one, climate change resilience can be seen not as a burden that eliminates jobs, but as an opportunity to create new and evolving jobs, and provides policy support for Objective 1B and is consistent with PSRC 2020 through 2026 Economic Development Strategy and countywide planning policies. And as for the change to Objective 1B, previously the use of the word balancing created this false impression that economic development comes at the expense of the environment, or protecting the environment comes at the expense of the economy. And now it just is rewritten to be less of a zero-sum game in our policy. Next slide, Taylor. Just quick theme of economic resiliency that I wanted to amend with 1B1, encourage the development of established and emerging industries that increase economic and environmental resilience to climate change, natural disasters, public health disasters, and other shocks to the economy. Background for this theme, economic resilience is becoming an increasingly important component of sustainable economic prosperity. Emerging threats from climate change and other disasters necessitate Snohomish County's ability to prevent, withstand, and recover from major disruptions or shocks to its economic base. Next slide, Taylor. And this next theme is along regulatory reform, just some slight corrections. Policy 2A3, it now reads, to ensure timeliness, responsiveness, and increased efficiency, the county shall maintain a program of continuous review of the permitting process to eliminate unnecessary procedures that do not respond to legal requirements for public review and resident input. And one of the major corrections there is we want to make it seem that we're doing a continuous review rather than just a periodic review, and a few other language choices changes. And then there was also the addition of Amendment 2A4, Snohomish County shall endeavor to process completed development applications within 120 days. This was actually another policy that was in the housing element, and then it just seemed to make more sense in the economic development element, so it was moved here. But basically, this theme is prioritizing the efficacy of Snohomish County's governance in regard to development and business regulations. Next theme, or next slide, I'm sorry, Taylor. Workforce training. There's an amendment to 5A. Snohomish County shall promote education and training opportunities for the workforce. That's Objective 5A. And then I made some changes to policy 5A2. Snohomish County shall encourage and, where feasible, help finance vocational, technical education, and skills training opportunities that help retain existing aerospace and advanced manufacturing industries, retrain timber industry workers, retain and train healthcare workers, construction workers, and information technology workers, integrate training and education with current and projected industrial employment needs, and encourage business government partnerships in training and education. And the reason for these slight amendments here, just some background, there were some recent PSRC workforce recovery planning efforts that indicate there's going to be certain gaps in occupations, a supply gap. And the previous economic development element was still in kind of a pre-COVID forecast for jobs and supply gaps. And now we've updated it with post-COVID gaps that we need to address going forward. Next slide. Human services and childcare opportunities. Two amendments that I added here. Objective 5B, Snohomish County shall align human service delivery with employment opportunities. And with federal and state funding and state regulators to encourage ample and safe childcare opportunities, particularly for working families. Background here, sustainable development must encompass economic, ecological, and social goals. Human services and affordable childcare is a crucial part of the American economy, and it helps enables workers to participate in the economic system. Next slide, Taylor. I believe this is the final theme that I added, displacement mitigation and diversity, equity, and inclusion. I added 2 amendments. 1C1, the county shall consider displacement mitigation strategies for businesses affected by growth and development. And 5B1, the county shall encourage initiatives that drive diversity, equity, and inclusion and support equal employment opportunities within the local workforce. And just some background on why those amendments were added. There was new countywide planning policies that call for policies to address displacement. Sustainable development must consider economic, ecological, and social impacts, or profits, planet, and people. There's also 2 CPP policies, ED18. Jurisdiction should identify the potential for physical, economic, and cultural displacements of existing locally owned small businesses as a result of development or redevelopment and market pressure. Jurisdictions shall consider a range of mitigation strategies to mitigate the impacts of displacement to the extent feasible. And then also CPP ED2, the county and city should foster an equitable business and regulatory environment that supports and encourages the establishment and growth of small and startup businesses, especially those that are women and minority owned. Next slide, Taylor. So there were some minor word choice and numbering updates as well. I don't want to waste too much time. Just to go through them quickly, like I said, on 1B, instead of doing a zero-sum game of balancing economic and environmental concerns, we reworded it to show that we recognize a healthy environment is essential to quality of life, and we shall address environmental concerns to support economic development. A few other minor word choices, like in 3C4, one of the policies involved marketing this industrial revenue bond financing the specific Pilchuck Development Public Corporation, which isn't really solvent anymore. So we reworded it just to say that we do value marketing industrial revenue bond financing, just not through this development corporation anymore. There were some other elements of the past economic development element where it really focused on central business districts, and I changed the words to say job centers, just because sometimes economic development can incorporate rural areas rather than CBDs or central business districts. Some renumbering due to the repeal of certain policies from ordinances. Again, 3D5, there was a focus on just existing industrial areas, but commercial properties are important too. So I added language like underutilized urban lands. And then more sensitive language choices, instead of saying things like stakeholders, say key parties, that kind of minor word choices and renumbering. Next slide, Taylor. There were some changes to the element narrative as well. In the chapter introduction, amendments to the element narrative prioritize non-urban economic development, creative placemaking, and recreation aims, and data updates to the 2024 and 2029 forecasted occupation gaps. One of the intro sentences says something like Snohomish County views economic development as an organizing principle of urban activity. And I nixed that sentence because sometimes you can have economic development aims of like rural agriculture, visiting a vineyard, something like that. And that's not necessarily urban, but still economic development. Want to emphasize creative placemaking. So, a place where people want to live, work, and recreate. Recreate was added. And then there was just some data updates as well. Most of the data in that economic development chapter was pre-COVID. Projected things like for future job growth was in the service sector, traditional industrial and commercial development. And then I retooled the language to sort of show the forecast of post-COVID top industries would be manufacturing, education and health services, retail trade, some specific subcategories, software publishing, professional, scientific, and technical services, things like that that were updated. Next slide, Taylor. Public participation. There was numerous public comments on economic development that was received from residents, legal interest, advocacy groups, business interests, government staff and officials. Staff report kind of lays it all out, as does the index of records if people are curious for specific comments. Just a quick run through the process. Snohomish County held a visioning comment period for the 2024 comp plan update between November 1, 2021 and February 25th, 2022. Compiled general input from 100 comments, and then we advertised the comment period. Staff traveled across the county, speak with businesses, community members about the importance of the comp plan, and the comment period was advertised through press release on the 2024 update project website, listserv emails, newsletter articles. Staff compiled a draft update synthesizing public comments, the regional vision, staff expertise, and it was presented back to the public for comment in PDS newsletters and within emails sent to commentators. And finally, public comments were received from postings placed on the 2024 update project website, although comments explicitly about the economic development element were somewhat limited. And there's some specifics that I can get into, but they're all kind of in the staff report and index of records. Next slide, Taylor. Public comments were received from postings. 11 comments were received that were pretty substantive. A lot of the comments agree with the new policies that emphasize growth and green jobs, mitigation displacement, creative placemaking. Some express concern that growth might threaten environmental concerns. Others express concern that regulatory reform might threaten environmental concerns. Some commenters wanted the government to have less government interference. Others wanted more government interference, like fiber optic, flight infrastructure, freight infrastructure. There were no real revisions based on the public comments received, although there were some good ideas. A lot of them were based around freight and transportation, so I redirect them to the project managers who are doing the transportation element. Next slide. So next steps, staff will review comments received tonight, determine if any further amendments are required. All questions not answered tonight will be responded to via email, and public hearings on all the 2024 update amendments start on October 25th and continue through October 27th, 2023. Is there a next slide, Taylor, or is that it? Okay, so questions on the economic development element amendments?
Thank you, Mike. Any questions from fellow commissioners? Economic development. Any questions for Mike? Okay. If it's okay with you, Michael, let's move to the next item.